Harper Miles could not have envisioned a more luxurious setting for her engagement party than the sprawling Christopher mansion. Perched on a slight hill overlooking the suburbs of a bustling African city, the estate boasted ornate, wrought-iron gates that swung open only for the most exclusive of guests. Beyond those gates lay a long, tree-lined driveway leading to a magnificent mansion that glowed golden under carefully placed spotlights. Lush gardens, dotted with exotic flowers, framed the building's expansive marble steps. Each step seemed to echo sophistication and wealth. Inside the mansion's vast ballroom, a polished marble floor reflected the soft, warm light of 100 chandeliers. Waitstaff, dressed in crisp white shirts and black slacks, wove through the crowd carrying silver trays of champagne flutes, petit fours, and bite-sized delicacies. The scent of fresh roses, flown in specifically for the occasion, mingled with the perfume of well-dressed socialites, high-ranking city officials, and international business partners of the Christopher family. It was here that Harper Miles, a vision of poise, stood at the center of everyone's attention, her engagement ring glittering whenever she lifted her hand. She wore a custom-fitted emerald gown, tastefully designed to showcase her flawless figure and complement her light brown complexion. She had chosen emerald because it contrasted beautifully with the delicate gold engagement band on her finger, ensuring that both ring and dress would stand out in photographs. Otis Christopher, her fiancé, was a tall, broad-shouldered gentleman, exuding a quiet warmth that made him instantly likable. He had a disarming smile, the kind that put people at ease. At 35, he had already earned a respectable name for himself as the heir to a multinational agricultural export business started by his late father. Yet, despite his privilege, Otis was known for his humility, often choosing to avoid ostentatious displays of wealth. Tonight, however, he made an exception. After all, it was his engagement party, a moment meant to be celebrated in grand style. Standing near them was Martha Christopher, Otis' elderly mother, who still carried herself with regal composure. Her silver hair neatly pinned in a bun, and her calm expression made her a picture of dignified wisdom. She moved slowly across the polished floor, greeting guests with a soft voice and a graceful inclination of the head. She appeared somewhat reserved in large gatherings, but if you looked carefully, you could sense the keen spark of intelligence in her eyes. As the pair of newly engaged sweethearts posed for photographs, a hush fell upon the room. One of Otis' business associates tapped a spoon against his champagne flute, signaling that it was time for a formal toast. Otis gently placed a hand on Harper's waist, guiding her closer, and turned to acknowledge the man preparing to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," the associate began, his voice echoing in the lofty hall. "We are gathered here to honor the engagement of Mr. Otis Christopher, one of the finest men I've had the privilege of working with, and the lovely Miss Harper Miles. May their union be blessed with happiness, prosperity, and enduring companionship." A wave of applause spread across the room. Friends and acquaintances hoisted their glasses in unison, murmuring words of congratulations. Harper allowed a demure smile to settle on her lips as she acknowledged the cheers with a polite nod. Inwardly, however, her thoughts were swirling with different sentiments. She was indeed excited. How could she not be, standing in a mansion of this magnitude, surrounded by wealth and influence? Still, a hidden part of her was triumphant for an entirely different reason. She had secured a match with one of the wealthiest men in the country. A close friend of Harper's, a stylish woman named Felicia, sidled up to her. Felicia leaned in and whispered, "Girl, you have it all now. This place, that ring, and an incredibly sweet man. Some people spend their entire lives dreaming about this moment." Harper tilted her head in acknowledgement, eyes flicking across the room. "I know," she whispered back, her tone laced with a subtle pride. "Otis is incredible, but you know me. I've always aimed high." "You certainly got your wish," Felicia teased with a nudge. "Just make sure to keep that sweet mother of his happy. She's the only family Otis has." Harper's eyes followed Felicia's subtle gesture toward Martha, who was now quietly chatting with a group of older guests on the other side of the ballroom. Harper feigned a gracious smile. "Martha and I will get along just fine," she said lightly, swirling the champagne in her glass. But deep down, she was already calculating the weight of responsibilities that might come with her role in the family. She told herself that if playing the role of a good daughter-in-law was what it took to remain in Otis' good graces, and thus maintain access to his fortune, she would manage it. Meanwhile, Otis noticed them whispering and walked over, hooking an arm around Harper's waist. "You look absolutely stunning tonight," he said, leaning closer so she could hear him above the murmured conversations in the room. His gaze was tender, genuinely appreciative. She placed a hand on his chest, batting her eyelashes coyly. "I wanted to look my best for you. I'm the luckiest man on earth." Otis responded with sincerity in his eyes. In the background, Martha watched the interaction. She noticed the contentment in her son's expression and offered a small smile. Otis' happiness came first for her. If Harper was the woman he loved, Martha intended to welcome her wholeheartedly. Still, there was a trace of caution in her heart. She had learned through a lifetime of experience that not everyone was as they seemed. An hour later, the couple cut into a large engagement cake, chocolate and vanilla layers lavishly frosted and topped with edible gold leaf. Applause and camera flashes filled the air as they fed each other the first slice. Harper's bright laugh echoed amidst the crowd, and Otis wiped a dab of frosting off her lip with his thumb. It was a delightful, romantic moment, captured by every photographer present. When the music resumed, they shared their first dance of the evening, gliding over the marble floor to a soft, melodic tune. Guests whispered, "They look so perfect together, and Harper is beautiful, and Otis is truly lucky." Some felt a twinge of envy, but admiration dominated. The scene looked like a fairy tale, Harper's emerald gown shimmering under the lights, and Otis, ever the gentleman, leading her gracefully. But illusions can be fragile. Beneath Harper's polished exterior lived a hunger for status and material comfort that overshadowed everything else. And for Martha, an uneasy feeling lingered in the periphery of her thoughts. She couldn't yet define it, but the voice of intuition told her to observe carefully in the coming weeks. At the close of the evening, once most guests had trickled out, Otis and Harper stood at the mansion's entrance to thank the last few attendees. The couple's faces glowed, partly from the lights, partly from the sheer joy of the celebration. When the final car disappeared down the long driveway, Otis breathed a sigh of contentment. "What an incredible night," he said, turning to Harper. "I can't wait to start our lives together." Harper smiled sweetly, laying a hand on his shoulder. "It's going to be amazing," she replied, her voice soft. Meanwhile, she glanced back at the grandeur of the mansion's interior, the glittering chandeliers, the plush furniture, the well-kept gardens. It was all she had ever dreamed of, and more. If it meant keeping Otis happy, she would continue to play the perfect fiancé. Martha, standing a little way behind them, quietly took in the scene. She caught Harper's gaze resting a second too long on the possessions around her. There was nothing overt, yet something within that split-second look made Martha purse her lips. She couldn't pinpoint it exactly, but she resolved then and there to keep watch over Harper's true intentions. A week after the engagement party, Harper moved most of her belongings into the Christopher mansion. She had her own suite of rooms, lavishly decorated with plush carpets, antique paintings, and drapes made of the finest silk. The vanity table in her bedroom displayed rows of expensive cosmetics and perfumes, each bottle shimmering like a trophy. The massive walk-in closet offered an array of designer shoes and dresses she had collected over the years of meticulously curating her outward image. Every morning, Otis left for the city to oversee business dealings, returning in the late afternoon. Before he headed out one particular day, he stood in the foyer with Harper, who was dressed in a casual yet stylish outfit, fitted jeans and a chic blouse that highlighted her figure. He held her hands gently. "While I'm at work," he said with a warm smile, "I hope you won't mind stopping by Mother's room once in a while, just to chat or see if she needs anything. You know how dear she is to me." Harper responded with an immediate nod, her voice tinged with performative sweetness. "Of course, Otis. I'd be happy to. Martha and I get along well. Otis leaned in and planted a soft kiss on her cheek. Thank you. She's been alone in this big house since Father passed away. I think she'll appreciate the company. Truthfully, Harper bristled inside at the notion of babysitting an old woman, but she covered it up with a smile. I'll keep her company, she promised. As soon as Otis left, she let out a small sigh of exasperation. When she glanced at her phone, she saw messages from friends inviting her for brunch and shopping sprees. So many possibilities, but now she felt obligated to stay around because Otis had specifically asked it of her. Nevertheless, Harper decided to begin the day with a polite knock on Martha's door, which stood at the far end of the second-floor corridor. Martha's suite was more modest compared to the opulence in Harper's wing. Simple pastel walls, light, airy drapes, and an old wooden rocking chair by the window. When Harper entered, she found Martha reading a well-worn Bible in that rocking chair, the morning sunlight illuminating her silver hair. "Good morning, Martha," Harper began, mustering a gentle tone. "Need anything?" Martha looked up, smile lines creasing her face. "Good morning, dear. That's kind of you to ask, but I'm quite all right. Did you sleep well?" "Yes, I did," Harper answered, clearing her throat. "Otis asked me to see if you needed help with anything. Maybe setting out your medication or fetching you breakfast?" Martha nodded in appreciation. "I've already taken my vitamins, but a cup of tea would be nice if it's not too much trouble." Harper forced a friendly grin. "Not a problem at all." She turned and walked to the kitchen, mentally resisting the urge to roll her eyes. She wasn't used to playing caretaker, even though Martha hardly required one. She prepared the tea, carefully carrying it upstairs on a silver tray, along with a few biscuits. Martha received it gratefully, taking a small sip. "Thank you, Harper. You're very thoughtful." Harper placed the tray on a side table and lingered awkwardly. She considered making an excuse to leave, perhaps to meet her friends for a brunch date, but she recalled Otis' request. Summoning an amiable tone, she asked, "So, how do you usually spend your mornings?" "Oh," Martha replied, placing the teacup on the saucer. "I enjoy reading, or sometimes gardening in the backyard. And occasionally, I'll do a little knitting. My hands aren't as nimble as they used to be, but I still manage." "Sounds nice," Harper responded, feigning interest. She fiddled with the hem of her blouse, anxious to wrap up the conversation. A moment of silence stretched between them. Martha's sharp gaze took in Harper's posture. How stiff she seemed in this domestic role. Still, Martha chose not to mention it. Instead, she returned her attention to the book in her lap, silently dismissing Harper. In the days that followed, Harper did her best to check in on Martha whenever Otis was around, ensuring he'd see or hear about her visits. When Otis was away, however, Harper limited her interactions. She'd pop in for the briefest of moments with a forced smile, then retreat to her own errands, like scheduling salon appointments, browsing expensive boutiques, or flipping through glossy magazines in her plush suite. From time to time, she'd greet Martha curtly in passing. The older woman simply nodded, as if keeping track of every fleeting visit. One afternoon, as Harper left the house, she spotted Martha quietly tending to a small patch of flowers in the garden. Instinct told Harper to acknowledge her, so she walked over. "That's a lovely rose bed," she offered, glancing at the blossoms in bloom. Martha looked up, a gardening tool in her hand. "Thank you, dear. I've cared for them since Otis was a child. They flourish when they're properly watered and given enough sunlight." Harper nodded, forcing an interested expression, yet internally feeling bored. "Right," she replied, adjusting her designer purse on her shoulder. "Well, have a good day, Martha. I'm meeting some friends for lunch." Without waiting for a reply, she turned on her heels and walked toward her new sports car, an engagement gift from Otis, which sparkled in the driveway. As she opened the car door, a fleeting sense of irritation flashed across her mind. She found the entire caretaker routine annoying, especially since Martha was no helpless old woman. She was independent, physically and mentally, and never asked Harper for more than minimal assistance. Nonetheless, in Harper's view, merely being expected to care about Martha felt like an unwanted task. Harper believed that marrying Otis should grant her immediate freedom and indulgence, not responsibilities. Meanwhile, Inside the mansion, Martha rose from her garden crouch, brushing soil off her gloves. She peered through a window, noticing Harper driving away in a flashy swirl of dust and engine noise. A subdued sigh escaped her lips. She hoped that in time Harper's sense of consideration for others would grow, but the older woman couldn't shake off a gnawing doubt. She had met kind and charitable people all her life, and Harper, while polite on the surface, gave off an air of impatience and mild disdain. Martha prayed silently, hoping her instincts were wrong and that Harper would soften once she settled fully into the family. But as the days turned into weeks, Harper's veneer of politeness seemed to wear thinner. She would never openly disrespect Martha in front of Otis, but subtle signs, eye rolls, impatient sighs, or forced smiles began to crop up more often. Martha watched, said little, and kept her discoveries to herself. She wouldn't undermine Otis' relationship based on suspicion alone. She wanted her son to be happy. But the quiet tension in the home was steadily mounting. A month after the engagement party, Otis approached Harper one morning in the sunlit kitchen where she was casually flipping through a fashion magazine. He was dressed in a crisp business shirt and slacks, preparing to head to an important meeting. Martha, seated nearby, sipped tea as she listened to them converse. "Harper," Otis began, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I need a favor. My mother wants to visit her old friend in the neighboring town, and unfortunately, I'm tied up with meetings today. Would you be so kind as to drive her there in the new car? She hasn't seen her friend in months, and this meeting is important to her." Harper hesitated, her thoughts already swirling with alternative plans. She had arranged to meet Felicia and two other friends for a shopping trip at an upscale mall, followed by a spa appointment in the afternoon. Yet, she sensed that refusing outright would look bad, especially since Otis seldom asked for personal favors. So, she forced a bright smile. "Of course, I'd be happy to take her," she lied, swallowing her annoyance. "Which town is it?" "It's just about 40 minutes away," Otis replied. "Her friend, Mrs. Grant, has been feeling under the weather, and Mom wants a visit. I know it's last minute, but I really appreciate this. We'll all have dinner together tonight." "Deal, deal," Harper replied. She plastered on her best facade while internally grimacing at the prospect of spending hours chauffeuring Martha around. Martha watched the exchange quietly, a small smile on her lips. "Thank you, dear," she murmured to Harper. "I hope it won't interfere with your schedule." "It's perfectly fine," Harper said out loud. Then she flipped her magazine shut a bit too quickly, her forced cheerfulness barely masking her frustration. An hour later, Harper started the car, a sleek, brand-new model that Otis had gifted her shortly after their engagement. Martha, seated in the passenger seat, carefully buckled her seatbelt. As they pulled out of the driveway, Martha noticed the tightness around Harper's mouth. Hoping to break the ice, Martha asked, "How are your friends doing? I hear you go out with them quite often." Harper gave a perfunctory nod, eyes fixed on the road. "They're fine, just busy like everyone else." Martha nodded, noticing Harper's curt tone, but chose not to comment. Instead, she gazed out the window, watching the scenery change from the lush surroundings of the mansion's neighborhood to the more commercial outskirts of the city. Gray clouds gathered in the distant sky, hinting at a potential downpour later in the day. They arrived at Mrs. Grant's home around mid-morning. It was a modest house, warm and cozy on the inside, filled with the scent of fresh bread and the subdued lighting of lamps in corners. Mrs. Grant, an old family friend, greeted them with delight and ushered them into a living room adorned with crocheted blankets and photos of her grandchildren. "Thank you so much for bringing Martha," Mrs. Grant said to Harper. "It's been ages since I've seen her. My old bones don't allow me to travel often these days." Harper offered a small smile, keeping an eye on her phone's clock. "It's no trouble at all," she lied again. In truth, she was already calculating how soon she could leave. While Martha and Mrs. Grant caught up, reminiscing about old memories and exchanging the latest family news, Harper sat stiffly on the edge of a sofa, politely sipping a cup of tea. When an hour passed, she cleared her throat and glanced meaningfully at Martha, hoping to speed things along. Martha, immersed in conversation, either didn't notice or chose to ignore the signal. Finally, after 2 hours, Mrs. Grant asked them to stay for lunch. Harper's forced smile returned. "I'd actually prefer to head back soon," she interjected, her tone courteous but firm. "I have some errands to run in the city." Martha gave Mrs. Grant a regretful look. "We'll have to accept your hospitality another time," she said, placing a gentle hand on Mrs. Grant's shoulder. "It's so good to see you again." Mrs. Grant nodded, walking them to the door. "Take care, Martha. And thank you again, young lady," she said to Harper, who nodded stiffly. As they climbed back into the car, the clouds overhead had grown thicker and darker. Harper tightened her grip on the steering wheel, silently urging the visit to be over. Her mood soured further as large raindrops started to splatter on the windshield just minutes into the drive. "Perfect," Harper muttered under her breath, turning on the wipers. The rhythmic whoosh-whoosh only heightened her annoyance, intensifying her sense of being trapped in an unwanted errand. Martha, seated calmly beside her, seemed unbothered by the rain, content to watch the passing countryside. Despite the bad weather, the ride back was mostly uneventful, until Martha remembered something crucial. "Oh dear," she said suddenly, gently pressing her fingertips to her forehead. "I forgot my purse at Mrs. Grant's home. All my identification, my keys, everything is in that purse." At first, Harper didn't respond, too focused on navigating the slick road. Then Martha repeated, more urgently, "Harper, please, can we turn around? I left my purse behind." A flash of anger crossed Harper's face as she glanced at the clock on the dashboard. They had already been driving for 20 minutes. Turning back now would add another 40 minutes to the trip, plus the time it would take for them to get the purse. She had hoped to be done with this chore quickly and salvage part of her day with her friends. Clenching her jaw, she forced a calm tone. "Are you sure it's absolutely necessary to get it now? Mrs. Grant can bring it to you another time, or we can come back in a couple of days." Martha's voice remained steady, though she looked distressed. "I'm sorry, dear, but I really do need that purse. My house keys and my identification are in it. Mrs. Grant doesn't drive much these days, so it would be a big inconvenience for her to bring it to me." Harper exhaled heavily. "Fine," she muttered. "We'll go back." She made a sharp U-turn at the next possible spot, tires skidding slightly on the wet road. Martha apologized again. "I'm truly sorry, Harper. I should have double-checked before we left." Harper didn't answer, pressing her lips together. The next 15 minutes were thick with tension. Rain hammered against the car roof, forming rivulets on the windows. Each passing minute felt like a personal affront to Harper, who loathed the fact that she was being delayed by what she deemed someone else's carelessness. When they finally arrived back at Mrs. Grant's, Harper refused to turn off the engine. She drummed her fingers on the steering wheel, glaring at the rain-soaked house. "Go ahead," she said to Martha. "I'll wait here." Martha sighed but complied, stepping carefully out of the car and into the downpour. She hurried toward the front door with slow, measured steps. Her age made running impossible. It took a few minutes for her to retrieve the purse, and by the time she returned, her clothes were damp around the edges. "All right," Harper snapped as Martha climbed back in. "Let's just get home." Martha glanced at her, face creased with concern. "Again, I'm sorry. I know this is—" "No, it's fine," Harper interjected coolly, reversing the car with a jerk. "Let's just go." Halfway into the return journey, the downpour intensified. The sky seemed to crack open, releasing buckets of water onto the windshield. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning briefly illuminated the dark gray sky. The roads were nearly deserted, with most drivers opting to wait out the storm. An uneasy silence settled inside the car, broken only by the loud swoosh of the wipers. Harper's frustration simmered just beneath the surface, each raindrop a reminder of how her day had been ruined. In her mind, she pictured her friends laughing over lunch without her, possibly heading to the spa by now, all while she was stuck chauffeuring Martha around. The sense of injustice gnawed at her. Martha, sensing Harper's foul mood, attempted to lighten the tension. "Thank you again," she said softly. "I know this wasn't how you planned to spend your day." Harper let out a bitter laugh. "No, Martha, It really wasn't. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel. The road curved sharply ahead, and Harper slowed to navigate the bend. It was then Martha spotted a small roadside stall selling fresh produce, partially sheltered by a tin roof. "Could we stop for a moment?" Martha asked in her gentle voice. "I see some lovely vegetables. I'd like to get some for dinner." Harper's mouth dropped open in disbelief. She slammed on the brakes, pulling over to the soggy, gravel shoulder. Rain pounded on the roof. She turned to Martha, eyes flashing. "You got to be kidding. It's pouring, and we need to get home. Don't we have enough groceries at the mansion?" Martha pursed her lips. "I just thought we could pick up something fresh for Otis. But never mind, if it's too inconvenient." "Inconvenient?" Harper spat, her voice rising. "This entire trip has been inconvenient. I've wasted hours, got caught in the worst weather, and you keep asking for more. A ride here, a ride there. Oh, I forgot my purse, so I need groceries." "I'm not your personal driver, Martha." A stunned silence followed. The older woman's hands trembled slightly as she set them in her lap. "I'm sorry you feel that way," Martha said at length, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "Otis only asked because he trusts you. But if you truly find this so unbearable—" Harper's patience snapped. Yes, I do find it unbearable," she nearly shouted. Her voice echoed in the confines of the car. "I'm sick of playing the good fiancé, pretending to care about every little errand. I have a life too, you know." She glanced out at the torrential rain, heart racing with pent-up anger. Then, in a move even she didn't fully anticipate, she yanked the gear in a park and unbuckled her seatbelt. Her next words cut through the air like a knife. "Get out. You want to do errands? Do them yourself." Martha's eyes widened. She looked from Harper to the deluge outside, then back again, as if she hadn't heard correctly. "Harper, it's pouring." "I don't care," Harper growled, leaning over to fling open the passenger door. A gust of wind and rain whipped into the car, drenching the interior within seconds. "Get out now." Martha hesitated, stunned by the venom in Harper's tone. The older woman tried once more to reason with her. "Harper, dear, please, let's talk this through." "No more talking," Harper snapped, unfastening Martha's seatbelt in a brusque motion. "I'm done. I'm not your chauffeur. Find someone else to coddle you." She shoved the walking stick, carefully placed near Martha's feet, out onto the muddy ground. Shaken, Martha placed a trembling hand on the doorframe, then carefully swung her legs out of the car. The cold rain pelted her immediately, soaking through her light sweater. The storm's wind whipped her silver hair across her face. She took one last look at Harper, whose eyes blazed with anger. "Goodbye," Harper said icily, and before Martha could even fully step away, Harper slammed the passenger door shut. She revved the engine, spraying gravel and water as she pulled back onto the road. Martha stood there, hunched against the downpour, holding her purse with one hand and her walking stick with the other, calling out something unintelligible in the roar of the storm. Harper didn't look back. Her heart thumped violently, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew, in some distant part of her mind, that this was a catastrophic move, but her anger and resentment eclipsed all other thoughts. She kept driving, tears of rage forming in her eyes as she sped away from the figure receding in the rearview mirror. She half justified her action, telling herself that if Martha hadn't been so demanding, none of this would have happened. By the time Harper reached the mansion, the rain had subsided to a drizzle, but her nerves were still on edge. She parked the car haphazardly in the driveway and stormed inside, ignoring the startled house staff. She intended to go straight to her room, perhaps to vent her frustrations into a pillow, but no sooner had she entered than a maid approached her, wide-eyed. "Miss Harper," the maid said nervously, "Mr. Otis returned early. He's looking for you." A jolt of panic squeezed Harper's chest. "Already?" she asked, hating how her voice quivered. "Where is he?" "In the living room," the maid replied. Harper brushed past the maid and stepped into the spacious living room, still wearing damp clothes from that brief moment when wind and rain had entered the car. Otis stood near the fireplace, arms folded, gaze grim. Water dripped from her hair onto the marble floor. "Harper," Otis began, voice low. Where is my mother? Harper's mind raced for a believable lie, but her pulse pounded so loudly she couldn't think straight. She opened her mouth, but could only manage. She needed some air, so... Otis' voice rose, cutting her off. A passerby called me. My mother was found walking alone in the storm, soaked to the bone, asking for a ride home. A stranger drove her here moments ago. He paused, hands trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. What in God's name happened out there, Harper? Harper's face went pale. She realized there was no smooth way out of this. Martha had already arrived, meaning the story would come out. Desperately, she tried to soften the events. Otis, listen, it wasn't like that. We argued, yes, but it never meant for her to be stranded. Suddenly, a new voice emerged from the doorway. No, Harper. Martha stepped into the room. She had changed into dry clothes, but her face was drawn, her cheeks flushed from the ordeal. A caretaker hovered just behind her, looking worried. You forced me out of the car, Martha said quietly, her voice firm, refusing to break eye contact. Otis took a few steps back, as though the statement hit him like a physical blow. Is that true? He demanded, eyes flicking between Harper and his mother. You physically drove her out of the car in that storm? Harper's throat felt tight. She attempted to play victim, letting tears glisten in her eyes. It was an accident. I was upset. She forgot her purse. We had to turn around. The weather was awful, and I lost my temper. Martha's expression was calm, but laced with disappointment. Losing your temper doesn't justify cruelty, she said. You told me you were my driver and told me to get out. You threw my walking stick onto the ground, Harper. Had that kind stranger not picked me up, I could have been out there a long while. Otis stared at Harper in disbelief, tears threatening to fall from his own eyes. Anger, hurt, and betrayal warred in his face. I asked you to do me one favor, he said in a low, trembling voice. And this is how you treat my mother? The woman who raised me, who welcomed you into her home with open arms. Harper tried to approach him, reaching out for his hand. Otis, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I lost control for a moment. It was a mistake. Please, you have to believe me. I never wanted her to get hurt. He pulled away, fists clenched. A mistake, he repeated, voice thick with hurt. This isn't a small mistake, Harper. This is heartless. You left my mother, an elderly woman, in the pouring rain. What if she had slipped and gotten injured? What if she had gotten sick from a cold? Do you have any idea what could have happened? Harper's tears spilled over. She was no longer sure if they were genuine or part of her attempt to manipulate the situation. I know. Otis, I know, she pleaded, clasping her hands as if in prayer. Please forgive me. I'm just so stressed. Otis' rage flared. Stressed about what? Living here, with everything provided for you? Driving a brand new car that I bought you. He stepped back again, eyes burning with a pain that twisted Harper's heart in a way she'd never felt. I've never demanded anything of you. I simply asked that you look after my mother while I was at work. Martha quietly left the room, not wishing to escalate the argument. She believed Otis needed to handle this alone, away from her presence. Once she was gone, Otis locked eyes with Harper. The silence in the room was louder than any shouting could have been. Harper ventured forward, her voice trembling with desperation. Otis, I'll make it up to you, to your mother. I swear I'll never do anything like this again. She reached for his hand a second time. He pulled away, shaking his head in sorrow. I don't know if I can trust you, he said. This isn't a small flaw. It's a deep revelation about your character. I've tried to ignore the small signs of your impatience, your frustration, the way you roll your eyes when you think no one's looking. But this is too big to ignore. Sensing the finality in his tone, Harper panicked. She took his hands again, this time more forcefully, clinging to them. Otis, I love you. Please, I'm begging you. Don't end our relationship over one mistake. But Otis had seen enough. He gently but firmly removed her hands from his. I can't marry someone who treats my mother like an inconvenience or a burden, he said, heartbreak and anger mingling in his tone. You've shown me who you really are, Harper, and I'm appalled. A tremor of pure terror coursed through Harper. The comfort, the wealth, the security she had counted on, everything was slipping away. She sank to her knees, tears flowing freely. Please, please, Otis. I'm sorry. I let my emotions get the best of me. He shook his head slowly. I can't just unsee this, he repeated. Mother's well-being is paramount to me. You were cruel to her. That alone tells me everything I need to know. Silence fell once more, broken only by Harper's muffled sobs. Otis gazed down at her, anguish etched on his face. Finally, he said, the wedding is off. Harper's breath caught in her throat. She looked up at him, eyes wide with desperation. No, Otis, please. He turned away, his shoulders sagging, as if the weight of the decision was too heavy to bear. I need some time to decide what happens next, he said, voice hoarse. Right now, I don't want to see you. Pack your essentials. You'll be staying elsewhere until further notice. Then he walked out of the room, leaving Harper kneeling on the floor, her tears dripping onto the cold marble. The next morning, Otis prepared a suitcase for her. He instructed the security staff to escort her out. In a humiliating moment captured by a vigilant neighbor's smartphone camera, Harper was seen stepping out onto the mansion's driveway, where a taxi had been called for her. The drizzle from the night before had subsided, but the ground was still muddy. The suitcase wheels stuck in the wet gravel, and Harper struggled to yank it free, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying. And so Harper's downfall was complete. In a matter of weeks, she had gone from the grandest engagement party in a lavish mansion to a cramped hotel room, ridiculed by the public. She found herself replaying the pivotal moment over and over, forcing Martha into the rain. That single act had shattered all illusions she'd built around her perfect relationship. All the social climbing and facade of politeness had crumbled in the face of a single, irredeemably cruel decision. Yet, in the solitude of her new, humbler surroundings, Harper had time to reflect, really reflect, on how her arrogance and greed had cost her everything. For once, she didn't blame anyone but herself. After all, Otis had been kind, Martha had been welcoming, and Harper had taken it all for granted. She realized with a heavy heart that no amount of apology would erase the pain she'd inflicted on that good, elderly woman. As she stared at the shabby walls of her hotel room, her phone buzzing sporadically with notifications of hateful messages and news alerts about the latest scandal, Harper contemplated what to do next. Perhaps the only path left was one of true repentance, though she suspected Otis and Martha would never believe in her sincerity now. And Harper, from her small corner of the city, grappled with regret and the realization that her quest for wealth and status had blinded her to the importance of empathy and respect. No lavish gown or glittering ring could replace the genuine love and warmth she had scorned. Whether she would genuinely repent and try to rebuild her life was a question only time could answer, but one thing was certain. The rain that ended it all was a turning point she would never forget. The end.